About 95% of American adults are missing the same nutrient every single day. Not a vitamin, fiber. And that daily shortfall quietly drives the blood sugar swings, stubborn weight, and rising heart risk you feel after 40. I'm Sophia Hart. I read the research for a living, and I turn it into something you can actually use for your body after 40. So let me say the part nobody says out loud. You've been told to eat more vegetables about 1,000 times. It might be the most ignored advice in all of health, not because you're lazy, but because eat more vegetables means nothing. It's vague. It's boring. It sounds like a lecture you tuned out years ago. And meanwhile, you're doing the work. You've cut back, you're moving more. Maybe you've tried cutting carbs, or eating less, or one of those plans everyone at the office swears by. And the scale barely moves. The afternoon crash still flattens you around 3 o'clock. The cravings still win by 9 at night. You've felt that, haven't you? That moment when your focus just drops out from under you, and suddenly the only thing your brain wants is something sweet and fast. Here's what I need you to hear first. This isn't your fault. Your body is doing exactly what biology built it to do. The problem was never your willpower. The problem is that one quiet, unglamorous thing has been missing from almost every plate you've eaten your entire adult life, and its absence changes how your whole system handles food, hunger, and where your body decides to store fat. That thing is fiber. I know. Fiber has an image problem. It sounds like something your grandmother nagged you about. Bran flakes, prunes, a wellness cliche you file somewhere next to drink more water. But that reputation might be one of the most expensive misunderstandings in all of modern nutrition. And after 40, it starts costing you in ways you can actually feel. Because the plant material almost no one gets enough of was never just for digestion. Think of it less like roughage and more like a control panel, quietly setting the pace for how fast your food turns into sugar in your blood, how full you feel after eating, and even what your cholesterol looks like on paper. And here's the gap that should stop you cold. The average American adult eats around 15 grams of this a day. Your body was built to run on nearly double that. So for most people, half of the single most influential thing on their plate is simply not there. Every day, for years, for decades. That is not a minor nutritional footnote. That's a slow, silent shift in how your entire metabolism behaves. And it lines up almost perfectly with the exact problems that start showing up after midlife. Now stick with me here, because in a few minutes I'm going to show you something that sounds impossible. 2 people can sit down to the identical meal, same plate, same everything, and the one who ate a small amount of the right thing first can walk away with a sugar spike up to 1/3 smaller than the other person. Same food, completely different effect on the body. Once you see how that actually works, you won't be able to unsee it. But before the how, you need the why. You need to understand what that missing half is quietly doing or not doing inside you every single day. Let me make good on what I promised. The 2 people, the identical meal, the completely different result. Here's the machinery behind it. One kind of the plant material we've been talking about is what scientists call soluble fiber, but forget the label. Think of it as the gel-forming kind. The moment it meets water in your stomach, it swells into something thick and slow, almost like a soft gel. And that gel does something quietly powerful. It slows the speed at which the food around it breaks down into sugar and slips into your bloodstream. Picture pouring water through an open pipe, then pouring it through a sponge. Same water, completely different pace on the other side. That's what this does to a meal. And the effect is not small. Researchers have tested it directly, meal by meal. When people ate the fiber-rich part of a meal first, the vegetables before the bread or the rice, the sharp rise in their sugar afterward dropped by roughly 1/3 compared to eating the exact same plate in the reverse order. A 2025 study in the journal Diabetes Care confirmed it again. Put the fiber first, and the steep peaks flatten into gentle hills. Same food, same plate, a completely different signal sent to your body. Now, why does that rise matter so much? And why does it matter more the older you get? Every time your blood sugar shoots up fast, your body answers by flooding your system with insulin, the hormone whose job is to push that sugar out of the blood and into storage. A gentle rise asks for a gentle response. A sharp spike triggers a surge. And here's the part almost no one connects. After 40, your body handles that surge less efficiently than it did at 25. The same meal that barely registered in your 30s now sets off a bigger, clumsier reaction. And that reaction has a tail. When a big surge of the storage hormone clears the sugar out, it often clears out a little too much, and your levels dip below where they started. Your brain reads that dip as an emergency. It wants fuel, fast, and it wants it sweet. That's the 3 o'clock crash. That's the 9 at night craving that feels like a personal failing. So sit with this for a second. The hunger you've been blaming on your willpower may have been manufactured, quietly, mechanically, by the one thing missing from your plate. You weren't weak. You were riding a sugar roller coaster that the gel-forming fiber is built to smooth out. This isn't your fault. It's physics and biology doing exactly what they do when the brake is missing. But smoothing out that surge is only the first job this does. There's a second one, and it might explain why you're hungry again an hour after a full meal, and why the people who eat the most of this quietly tend to weigh less, without tracking a single bite. That mechanism is next. So let me answer the question I left you with. Why are you starving again an hour after a big meal? And why do the people who eat the most of this quietly stay leaner without ever counting a thing? Start with something you felt 100 times. A big plate of white pasta or a stack of pancakes fills you up for about an hour. Then you're rummaging through the cabinets again. But a bowl of lentils, beans, and vegetables? That holds you for hours on what feels like less food. Same fullness at the table, completely different staying power. Here's why. This is the second job of the plant material we keep circling back to, and it works through pure mechanics, no magic required. First, it takes up room. Fiber-rich food is bulky. It physically fills your stomach with more volume while bringing less along with it. Second, remember that soft gel from earlier? It doesn't just slow sugar, it slows how fast your stomach empties. Refined food rushes out of your stomach like flash paper, a bright flare, then gone. Fiber-rich food sits there like a log on a fire, slow, steady, still burning an hour later. And a stomach that stays full keeps sending one quiet message up to your brain. We're good. You can stop looking for food. Refined, stripped-down food skips all of that. It empties fast and leaves your stomach flat and signaling hunger again, long before your body actually needs more fuel. That's the mid-afternoon raid on the pantry. It was never weakness. You were fighting a hunger signal that never had to be that loud. And this shows up powerfully in the research. In one large weight loss study, scientists tracked everything people did and looked for the single strongest predictor of who actually lost weight and who managed to stick with it. It wasn't the specific plan. It wasn't sheer discipline. The strongest predictor was simply how much fiber a person ended up eating. More of it meant more weight lost and a far better shot at keeping the effort going. And when researchers zoomed out across 27 separate trials and well over 1,400 people, the pattern held. Adding more of this one thing, with nothing else changed, led to measurable weight loss, a smaller waist, and less hunger between meals. Not through restriction, through fullness that arrived sooner and stayed longer. Quick thing before we go further. If these last few minutes shifted how you think about your next plate, even slightly, that's the entire reason this channel exists. Subscribing is simply how you tell me to keep taking this research apart for you, one mechanism at a time. No gimmicks, just the science, every week. Now, here's what should really get your attention. Everything so far has been about today. One meal, one afternoon, one craving you can now see coming. But the deeper story is what this daily shortfall does when it stacks up over years. Because that quiet, missing half doesn't just shape your hunger. Given enough time, it starts to show up in the numbers a doctor measures at your checkup, and in something far bigger than the reading on any scale. That's exactly where we're going next. So let me pick up where I left you. What this daily shortfall does when it stops being about one afternoon and starts being about years. One sugar roller coaster, like the one I described earlier, is nothing. Your body shrugs it off. But run that same steep spike and crash 3, 4, 5 times a day, every day, for a decade, and something starts to give. Here's the machinery. Every one of those sharp surges forces your body to send out a big rush of its storage hormone to clean up the mess. Do that rarely, and the system stays sharp. Do it constantly, and your cells get flooded with that signal so often they simply stop responding to it. Scientists call this fading response insulin resistance. In plain terms, the key that used to open the lock cleanly now has to be jammed in harder and harder to do the same job. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. For years, while this is happening, your blood work can look completely normal. Your body compensates by shouting louder, pumping out more and more of that hormone to force your sugar back down. On paper, you look fine. Underneath, the system is straining. Type 2 diabetes can quietly develop for 7 to 10 years before anyone catches it. Now the numbers. More than 1 in 3 American adults is already in the warning zone, that in-between state where blood sugar sits higher than it should, just short of the full condition. Among adults in their 40s, 50s, and early 60s, it's closer to 1 in 2. And around 8 out of 10 of them have no idea. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't announce itself. It just quietly reshapes your metabolism while you feel basically fine. So where does the missing half fit in? Right at the center. Remember the gel that flattens each spike? Multiply that across years, and it means a far gentler, far quieter demand on your whole system, day after day. In a 2020 analysis in the journal PLoS Medicine, researchers pooled thousands of adults and dozens of trials and found the same thing again and again. The more of this a person ate, the steadier their long-term blood sugar held in a clear, step-by-step relationship. More of it, steadier numbers. Less of it, the slow slide. This was never really about the number on your scale. It's about whether your body is quietly drifting toward a condition that rewrites the back half of your life. And the daily gap on your plate is one of the very few levers in that story you actually get to pull. You didn't fail a willpower test. You were never handed the one piece that keeps the whole system calm. But even this, the diabetes slide, isn't the biggest cost the research ties to that missing fiber. When scientists followed hundreds of thousands of people for decades, the gap lined up with something far more fundamental than any single lab value: how long people lived and what they died of. That's the last piece, and it's the one that reframes everything. It's next. So here it is, the finding I've been building toward. Everything so far has been about how you feel and how your body runs. This is about something bigger, how long you get to run it. In 2019, the World Health Organization wanted a real answer to a simple question: which foods actually protect people from the diseases that kill us? So they commissioned a team at the University of Otago to find out. And these researchers didn't run one study. They pooled 40 years of them. Sit with the scale for a second, because it's staggering. 185 separate studies. 135 million years of combined human life, tracked and measured. 58 clinical trials on top of that. This is about as close to bedrock as nutrition science gets. And when the results landed in the Lancet, the headline was this: the people who ate the most fiber were 15 to 30% less likely to die, not from one specific thing, but from any cause at all, and from heart disease in particular. Let that sink in. Not 15% less likely to gain a few pounds, 15 to 30% less likely to die. And it wasn't a single disease hiding the effect. Fiber-rich food was tied to 16 to 24% fewer cases of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and colon cancer, 4 of the biggest reasons people in their 60s and 70s end up in a hospital bed. One quiet, unglamorous thing on your plate, bending the odds on nearly the whole map of what actually takes us down after midlife. Now here's the part that should feel like relief, not pressure. This is a dial, not a switch. You don't have to be perfect. In a separate pooling of 64 studies, every additional 10 grams a day was tied to roughly another 10% drop in the risk of dying early. Every step up counts on its own. And in one of the largest food studies ever run in America, the people eating the most, around 29 grams a day, had about a 22% lower risk of dying than those eating the least. That range matters, The protection climbed most steeply up to about 25 to 29 grams a day, a level most people never come close to reaching. The missing half we've been circling this whole time isn't a rounding error. It's the difference the research keeps pointing to, again and again. So step all the way back. This was never really about vanity, or a stubborn scale, or fitting into old jeans. The single most overlooked thing on your plate is quietly tied to whether you spend your 70s and 80s vital and independent, or managing one diagnosis after another. And almost no one told you, not because anyone was hiding it, but because the answer is quiet and unglamorous, and doesn't come in a bottle or a brand. It's just food, which leaves the only question that still matters. What do you actually do about it? Here's the part I've been building toward, and the good news is it's far simpler and far more forgiving than choking down a bowl of bran every morning. That's the last thing I want to give you. So here's the good news I promised, and it might be the most freeing thing you hear all week. After everything we've covered, the fix isn't one more thing to give up. It's the opposite. You're not cutting anything out. You're putting one thing back in. Sit with how different that is. Almost every approach to your weight has been about subtraction. Less food, fewer things you love, another list of forbidden items. This is the rare one that runs the other way. You add. And what you add makes the food you're already eating work better. That's why it tends to stick when restriction doesn't. You're not fighting your own biology. You're finally handing it what it was missing. Start with food, not a jar of powder. Every finding I've walked you through measured fiber the way it shows up on a plate, in whole plants, not a scoop stirred into water. That's where the real leverage is. And the richest sources aren't exotic. The quiet champions are legumes, beans, lentils, chickpeas. After that, whole grains like oats and barley, vegetables, fruit eaten with the skin on, and a handful of nuts or seeds. Reach for variety on purpose because different kinds do different jobs. Some thicken to steady the rise after a meal. Some add the bulk that keeps you full for hours. You want the whole range, not one hero food. And one honest caveat because it trips people up. Not all vegetables pull equal weight here. The watery ones, cucumber, tomato, even a plain bed of lettuce, are mostly water and bring surprisingly little fiber. Half an avocado, by contrast, brings around 9 grams on its own. A salad only turns into real fiber once you build it up. What you pile on top does far more than the leaves underneath. Now the low-effort part. You don't have to count a single gram. Try 3 things instead. Eat the vegetables or the beans first, before the bread or the rice. That simple order is one of the most tested tricks there is. Swap the stripped-down version for the whole one, brown instead of white, the actual fruit instead of the juice. And add a scoop of beans or lentils to a meal you already make, no spreadsheet required. But here's the one thing that decides whether this lasts. Go slow. If you double your intake overnight, your gut will rebel, the bloating and discomfort that make most people quit by day 3 and decide fiber doesn't agree with them. It's not that. You just move too fast. Add it gradually over a few weeks, and drink more water as you do, because this only works when it has enough water to swell and do its job. Slow and steady is the whole game. Remember that 25 to 29 gram range where the protection peaked? That's the direction you're drifting. Not a quota to obsess over, just where your plate is slowly heading. The crashes, the cravings, the quiet drift toward the numbers on your blood work, they all start to bend the moment you close this gap. This is one of the cheapest, most controllable, best supported moves in all of nutrition. No prescription, no perfect week, just the piece that was quietly missing, added back, starting with your very next meal. If this untangled something you'd been blaming yourself for, that's exactly what I'm here for. So subscribe, and these will keep finding you every week. And tell me in the comments, what's the one thing about your body after 40 you've never gotten a straight answer on? I read every single one, and they shape what I look into next. I'll see you at the next table.